What's going on, guys? Welcome to part 3 of the My Hero Academia War Arc review. I want to thank you for your support on the previous part. That video went well past 3,000 likes, so I do really appreciate it. Also, last thing just before we start, if you want to win some free merchandise and also see my face reveal, then stick around till the end of this video because I'll be linking to that video which you need to see. But without further ado, let's get into it. The story picks up with the #1 hero Endeavour flying straight towards Tomura Shigaraki. Endeavour unleashes a previously unseen move called Hell's Curtain, which surrounds the area in a blanket of flames with Shigaraki trapped in the center. As this is going on, the voice of All For One intrudes into Tomura's mind, commanding him to steal One For All. We see that Shigaraki is literally on fire as this is happening, but he continues to stand tall as if nothing is going on. He then leaps forward towards Endeavour with his hand outstretched and ready to decay him. However, thanks to Endeavour's lightning fast reflexes, he avoids the attack and then maneuvers himself to punch Shigaraki down into the rock below. The #1 states that no human being should have been able to move in this heat and that Shigaraki must now have a super regeneration quirk. Realizing that the situation is a bit tough, he blasts Shigaraki with more flames and radios the other heroes asking for backup from basically anyone who can fly. Shiggy's hand emerges out of the fire and once again he goes to dust Endeavour but is narrowly stopped when his wrist is grabbed. That isn't the end of it though, as the villain delivers an air cannon point blank to Endeavour's face. We previously saw AFO use air cannon during the battle at Camino and it's a pretty impressive quirk to say the least. The attack sends Endeavour flying straight through the rock and landing on the ground with a large thud. This gives Shigaraki a moment to breathe, in which he pockets about 6 or 7 quirk destroying bullets and picks up one of the hands of his family members, which I'm sure will be going back on his face at some point. As he continues to regenerate, he wonders why he still doesn't feel satisfied despite having all this new power. Endeavour comes in and launches a second wave of attacks, while Shigaraki thinks to himself that something inside is just urging him to go after One For All, which he then says out loud. Endeavour repeats the phrase in confusion, which is transmitted via the radio to all the heroes in the area. This moment was especially hilarious just because of the expression on Deku's face when he heard One For All mentioned on the radio, like this man was not ready at all. Because of AFO, Shigaraki now has Ragdoll's search quirk, which I've explained in detail in other videos. He uses this power to locate One For All in the city below, and thanks to his new super strength, he jets off into the sky just like All Might used to do. Endeavour warns everyone on the radio that Shigaraki is on the way, which causes serious panic amongst the students and heroes alike. Whilst the evacuation continues, Deku has a long hard think to himself and makes the decision to run to a deserted area so that Shigaraki will hopefully follow him and leave the citizens alone. He knows that Shiggy is likely looking for him, given that One For All was heard over the radio. Bakugo then tags along before Midoriya can even say anything, because he came to a similar realization. They then speed away together as Todoroki and the others look on in complete shock, just wondering like what are they doing. Using his search quirk, Shigaraki notices that One For All is now on the move, and if you notice, there is another student following behind Deku and Bakugo, though we'll find out who this is a bit later. Midoriya then radios Endeavour, and we get this funny scene where Deku asks the #1 to let him know if Shigaraki changes his direction, to which Endeavour replies, "Like I've got time for that," only to immediately tell Deku in his next breath that Shiggy has altered his course. As I explained, the villain is purely after One For All, so he's going wherever Deku is going. As they continue moving to the deserted area, Bakugo and Midoriya have a brief heart-to-heart, where we discover that Bakugo wants to get revenge against Shigaraki for the time he was kidnapped, and we also see that internally he's feeling a bit insecure about falling behind Deku in their path to become the best hero. As Shigaraki glides through the air, he combines his air cannon with a new quirk called radio waves, which fries the communication system that the heroes were using. We then see this awesome panel of Deku and Bakugo coming face to face with the man himself, as Shigaraki outstretches his hand ready to take One For All. In the words of Deku, this moment gave him the same fear of death that he felt when he was in Camino and encountered All For One. He foresees both himself and Bakugo about to disintegrate at the hands of Shiggy, but is saved at the last second by Gran Torino, who comes in clutch yet again. Torino is the only other person at this battlefield who knows of One for All, and when he heard it over the radio, he went looking for Deku. Meanwhile, as Shigaraki falls back to Earth, the dragon hero Ryukyu swoops in to smack him right back. Interestingly though, as she made contact, the villain attempted to disintegrate her, but his quirk didn't activate. This is thanks to our boy Aizawa, who appears out of nowhere with his eyes firmly focused on the villain. A news helicopter then appears in Jakku to start broadcasting the battle, and we see that back at UA, All Might is babysitting Eri and watching with an extremely concerned look on his face. Yeah, I'm not sure if Eri should be watching this. The manga then shows us the families of the heroes involved just going on with their daily lives, completely oblivious as to what's going down. Anyway, because of Ryukyu's attack, Shigaraki was sent flying into the air whilst in his quirkless state. However, as you can see from this expression, he's not really worried or fazed or anything like that. He quickly whips out the phone in his pocket and orders his army of Nomu to kill every person they see. With the help of his sidekick, Endeavour flies directly towards Shigaraki in the air and pretty much attempts to kill him just with an all-out burst of fire. This is unsuccessful though, as even without any quirks, the villain was strong enough to push himself mostly out of the way. In the words of Endeavour, a swing of the arm lets Shigaraki move around freely in midair, just like somebody else. According to Dr. Garaki, it's not quite on the level of All Might, but you know, it's pretty damn close. Tomura then maneuvers in the air and pulls up in front of Endeavour before punching him down into Ryukyu, who was standing below. We then get perhaps the most disrespectful panel this manga has ever seen, as he stands on the body of both heroes and raises his fist to kind of mock Endeavour for what he did during the Pro Hero arc. These are two top 10 heroes, you know, you got the number 1 and the 10th place hero, and he's standing on top of them. Like, this is ridiculous. Oh yeah, and before I forget to mention it, while all of this is going on, Manuel has been using his water quirk in small doses to kind of just keep Aizawa's eyes hydrated, and therefore, you know, he can last way longer before he needs to blink again. Elsewhere, Gran Torino succeeded in taking Deku and Bakugo to a more secluded location away from the big fight. Torino is about to head back and help Aizawa, who's having trouble walking due to his leg, which was previously broken by a Nomu. Despite Deku's own desire to help the professor, Gran Torino warns him to stay far away, as Shigaraki can't even be allowed the opportunity to steal One for All. He tells the students that Shigaraki is just one man, and if all these pro heroes can't defeat one person, then what's the point of this hero-saturated society? However, in the distance we can see a few shadowy figures start to appear, and as they get closer we start to realize it's the army of high-end Nomus that Shigaraki had commanded to kill everyone. According to Dr. Garaki, Shigaraki woke these Nomu up when he used the radio waves earlier, so it had two purposes. Unlike the other high-end Nomus we've seen, these ones actually hadn't made it to the testing phase yet, so they can't really think for themselves, but their physical capabilities are still just as strong as you'd expect. Amongst the chaos, Shigaraki lunges straight towards Aizawa in what must have been a terrifying moment for the professor. Eraserhead thinks about his students, Shinzo included, and contemplates how he can't afford to die, not until they graduate and become heroes. Also, if he dies, there will be no one to hold back Shigaraki's full power, so yeah, that's pretty important too. Rocklock and Gran Torino lunge in and try and hold back this demon, but before they can do that, a student who never listens to instructions gets in there first and pushes Shigaraki back. Deku says that while the other heroes are busy fighting the Nomu, he and Bakugo need to join the battle to defeat Shigaraki and save Aizawa in the process. In that spirit, Bakugo delivers his AP machine gun attack whilst Deku wraps Shigaraki in Black Whip, but the villain easily brushes off both of them and tells Bakugo that he's no longer of interest, which is a reference back to the whole kidnapping fiasco. Endeavour swoops in to save the boys by punching Shigaraki real hard in the torso, but this doesn't keep him down as the madman quickly regains his balance. The number 1 hero reiterates that Shiggy's body is as powerful and sturdy as All Might's, and Gran Torino refers to it as beyond human at this point. Shigaraki then speeds off towards Midoriya and thinks to himself that he just needs to scoop up Deku and then run away, which I thought was quite a funny thought process. The voice in his head then reappears and orders him to acquire One for All, and Shigaraki says out loud, "You will be mine, little brother." This moment was like the will of All for One overtaking Shigaraki's consciousness, which causes the villain to ponder how, whilst he is grateful to AFO, he doesn't actually want to be like him. In his words, he doesn't want his master's voice to be inside his head, and he metaphorically destroys the image of AFO in his mind, stating that he now controls himself. Endeavour launches his famous Hell Spider attack, which was enough to slice a building into pieces, but Shigaraki effortlessly weaves in between the flames on his way to capturing Deku. Gran Torino tries to intervene and tells Shigaraki to stop trampling over the memory of Nana Shimura, to which her grandson replies, "Who?" Endeavour then tries another attack as Torino holds on to Shigaraki, but the villain grows tired of messing around and quickly uppercuts Torino in the stomach before blasting past Endeavour. As he flies through the air towards Deku, Bakugo is hovering above Shigaraki and states that Midoriya was just the bait before pulling the pin out of his gauntlet and unleashing his most ferocious attack we've ever seen. With Shigaraki's body caught up in the blast, Endeavour swoops in to finish him off. Not only is this an awesome panel, but it truly feels like a moment in which the heroes can claim victory. I mean, it's not, but it feels like that. The manga then switches back to the forest as Gigantomachia attempts to run to his master with the League of Villains on his back. Interestingly though, Dabi has also chosen to take Skeptic with him, which I assume will be relevant later on. On the hero side of things, Mount Lady is the only pro who compares to Machia in terms of size, and despite her best efforts to try and hold him back, he picks her up by the leg and throws her away. There are other skirmishes occurring at the same time, including Cementos facing off against Getten, but their fight was rudely interrupted by Edgeshot fighting re-destro. Kamui Woods has Midnight on his back and uses his quirk to swing around like Tarzan and hopefully get towards Machia's mouth so that Midnight can release her quirk and put him to sleep. What they don't know is that the League are on Machia's back and Dabi catches them by surprise with a serious wave of firepower. Kamui Woods gets totally fried, and while Midnight is still flying through the air, Mr. Compress throws some heavy debris directly in her path. This causes her to fall back down to earth, and she looks pretty beaten up at this point. She uses the last of her strength to radio Momo over the communication system. She informs Yayarozu of the situation and tells her that Gigantomachia must be put to sleep because he cannot be stopped by brute force alone. While this conversation is happening, a group of Liberation Army soldiers notice Midnight crawling on the ground, and one of them goes in for the kill. Midnight thinks to herself that Momo will make a fine leader someday, as the scene then cuts away, leaving her fate completely unclear. Yayarozu desperately calls out to her teacher but hears no reply, which is never a good sign. The students wonder what they should do next, and after some intense thinking, Momo formulates a plan in her mind, which begins with Jiro and Shoji using their quirks to estimate how far away Machia is and how tall he is. Jiro uses her quirk and notices that the beast has slowed down a little bit, which we see is because Kamui Woods came back from the brink and used his wood to tie Mount Lady to Machia's leg. Phase 2 of Momo's plan begins as she uses her body to produce these undiluted sedatives, one of which will be enough to put Gigantomachia to sleep if it enters his mouth. Each student is given one capsule, whilst Mineta, Momo and Mudman each lay down traps that will hopefully trip Machia up. Yayarozu drops some explosives into the ground, whilst Mudman makes the earth pretty soft so that her dynamite can then sink lower. Meanwhile, with Mineta, he attaches some rope to his sticky balls, which will also be very useful in a second. As planned, Machia trips up on the soft ground and falls face first into even more soft ground. He tries to get back up, but Mineta's balls are stuck to his chin, which means that other students like Sato and Kendo, they can pull on the rope to try and stop him from getting back up. Ibara from Class 1B wraps her thorns around his neck, and all the students are chipping in one way or another. For example, Aoyama is going all out with the lasers, and Denki tries to electrocute the League of Villains, but is seriously injured by Mr. Compress before he can do that. Invisible Girl and a bunch of others attempt to throw sedatives into Machia's mouth, but the big guy exhales, pushing back most of the students with his insane breath. Dabi follows this up with a wall of flames that rapidly spreads through the forest and prevents those who are blown away from getting closer. However, Mina activates her fireproof Acid Man armor and emerges from the fire with the sedative in her hand ready to throw. Mount Lady gets up and uses all of her strength to grab Gigantomachia by the jaw and open his mouth. Machia gets angry because all he wants to do is take the shortest route to Shigaraki, but naturally these heroes are now making that a bit difficult. Ashido hesitates because she recognizes this voice and realizes that he's the same creature she encountered way back in middle school. Fear begins to consume her as the sedative slips out of her hand. Machia then grabs Mount Lady by the head and throws her away for the second time this arc, with his left hand falling straight down towards Mina, and it's about to crush her in the process. Luckily though, our unbreakable boy Kirishima dives straight into Dabi's flames and pulled through at the last moment to push Mina out the way. In the process, he grabs her capsule, which means he now has two, and Tetsutetsu appears, bringing her to safety. Gigantomachia finally stands up and he shakes off all the pro heroes who were starting to climb on his body. He then holds the League of Villain members in his hands and puts them back on his back, telling his comrades to hold tight. Unknown to him though, there is one hero by the name of Red Riot who has been valiantly climbing up his arm the whole time. Kirishima comes face to face with the big guy and throws his capsule, only for it to be instantly shattered by Toga, who threw her knife. He thinks to himself that thanks to Mina's chivalrous spirit, he now gets a second chance to throw her capsule into Gigantomachia's mouth, which he promptly does in this epic moment that will 100% give us goosebumps when it's animated. Machia goes to crush Kirishima, completely unaware of what he's just eaten, but he's distracted when he starts receiving fire from these cannons which Momo created. Setsuna from Class 1B then swoops in to save an exhausted Red Riot as the professional heroes press forward to take down Gigantomachia. In the words of Yayarozu, the more Machia moves around, the faster the drug should work, so that's the job of the pro heroes now, just getting him moving. Weirdly though, Machia's jaw then slides upwards to cover his eyes, which is something we've never seen happen before, and as of making this video, it's currently unexplained why this happens. The scene then goes back to Jakku, with Endeavour standing above Shigaraki, telling him that it's over. Shigaraki has been seriously hurt by the last attack, and without his super regeneration, he's struggling to breathe. The number one hero says that Shigaraki can never bring down Hero Society because his destruction is hollow and it's not supported by any ideals. That said, the villain replies by repeating something that he heard from his father when he was young, which is that heroes hurt their own families just to help strangers. This statement is very applicable to Endeavour, who of course brought his wife to the brink of insanity, not to mention gave a terrible childhood to virtually all of his children. Shiggy begins to stand up and says that whilst heroes pretend to be society's guardians, in reality they ignore people that they can't protect, with this scene then flashing back to a young Tenko Shimura wandering alone in the streets of Japan. He goes on to elaborate that Hero Society is rotten from the core and that people have become so dependent on heroes that they neglect to do the right thing for themselves. This was implied by the flashback that you can see on screen, in which an old lady sees a young Tenko but decides not to do anything because she assumes a hero or the police will deal with it. According to Shigaraki, the system has always rejected him, and so now he's rejecting it back, which is the reason he took the power of All for One. In his words, he doesn't care if the heroes understand him or not, because this difference in understanding is what makes them heroes and villains. And that, my friends, is the end of part 3 of this War Arc review. If you'd like to see my face reveal and also how you can win some free merchandise, then click on the video on screen and in the description, which will take you to that face reveal. As always, thank you for watching, and until the next one, peace out.